Great Awakening and Grand Rising. It is I, Kani Mafa, and I'm coming to you with another video because I just need to unpack some more around this conversation because it's bringing up a lot for me, causing me to go back down memory lane on a lot of things, specifically with the conversation around Laverne dating a MAGA cop who had blue eyes and blonde hair. Now, I know that for most of y'all, the trend has passed and many of you are moving on. But I want to make sure that as we're moving on, we're playing the whole tape on both sides and we're not painting a fictitious, sanitized version of the truth in our mind, thanks to how propaganda tends to work, social media and propaganda. I'm 48 years old. I started transitioning at 14. 34 years. I've been living in my truth a good little bit now. I started advocating for my community when I went into the Covenant House and I became the president of the resident council when I was 17 years old. And that was the first time me as a being who felt more comfortable resonating with my foremothers and my feminine side, I occupied a space of leadership at the Covenant House, and I was able to model that for other trans and queer people who lived at the Covenant House. So I became a template for how to treat trans and queer people at the Covenant House. So I would say my advocacy for community officially began when I was around 17 years old. I would go on to continue to create space. Every time I had housing, I would look out for those who I loved and cared for. One in particular was a young girl that came to me who was like 15 years old. And I had a lot of children already, so I wasn't looking for another daughter, but I ended up being her mother. I learned a lot from that situation because at the time I was still young. My brain wasn't even finished developing. I was about 22 years old, and so I was working at a strip club, participating in sex work. I was also selling some substances in order to keep me from having to do things that I didn't want to do when I was with my partner at the time. So we had an agreement. When I was at work, I would top. When I was at home, I would bottom. This was obviously when I was still pre-op. And so because I never topped him, I was his woman, his girl, you know. And at work, I was the she-male. You know, I was commodified and fetishized by Caucasian men. And then I came home to be submissive and subjugated and dominated by him. And so, yeah, but that's where I was. Like I said, my brain wasn't even finished developing. I sold substances and I participated in sex work. The children who, you know, the ones who came up under me, because they, you know, had been rejected from their family and their homes, when they came to stay with me, I tried to make enough money to where they didn't have to do sex work. But they didn't want to do what I told them to do, because what I told them to do was go to school. I wanted them to have different opportunities and experiences from me, but they wanted to do what they saw me do. And that is why I learned from that experience If you don't want them to do that, then don't model that. Because in some ways we tend to glorify things without even trying to. Fast forward this story. One of my children ended up going to prison because they just started robbing, dates because they wanted that fast money. Another one of my children ended up dying, and they died because they started dating white men exclusively, and in the process of dating white men exclusively, they became addicted to heroin, injecting heroin. And when they overdosed from the heroin, the person was afraid to call the police, or afraid to call the ambulance. The Caucasian partner who she was with, they abandoned her, and she was found a few days later in an open field with her wig over her face behind a beauty supply store. Your partner didn't have enough courage, didn't feel connected enough to put his fear to the side and save your life. That's what it looks like sometimes to love outside of your race. Not all the time, but I just want to paint that picture. We also probably never going to talk about how many trans women are silently dying on hospital tables trying to be aesthetically pleasing for the white male gaze. Sometimes Black trans women expire in relationships with Caucasian men due to negligence, lack of concern, lack of care. There's also another factor that I want to really quickly wake up in this video. Black trans women who have invested in their transition are oftentimes perceived as more passable to outside races, particularly the Caucasian race. The same holds true for white trans women who've invested in their transition. They are more passable to Black men. It's something about how it's harder for men who are white to clock a Black trans woman who's been committed and saw that thing to a certain level. And the same thing holds true with white trans women. Like, people just legit don't always be getting, they don't even much be honed in, they don't even much be paying it no attention. And so there's a level of safety that comes in interracial dating. Because when you're introducing these people to your network, to your family, to your friends, you feel like, well, you couldn't even tell. So you're not concerned about them being able to tell. When a Black trans woman is being introduced to a Black family, to his Black family, there's a higher level of pressure. There's a higher expectation. You know what I'm saying? And it's not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying that most times it's easier for a girl to date outside of her race and be accepted under the guise of being cis. His family not even knowing that she's trans. Let's also wake that up too. They abandoned the Black community. They abandoned those relationships because they felt rejected and shunned by the church and by community and by politics and by government. And they seek solace in these men who have been, for them, oftentimes someone who can get to resources, that has access, and that is less violent towards them, even though a lot of times these same Caucasian men, their ancestors have been responsible for creating this reality that has turned Black trans women against Black trans men by way of the church. Because we look at these black men, and before we saw what propaganda told us to see, our killers and our murderers, and before we saw our unalivers, we saw the preacher that was speaking down on us. We saw the deacon that was looking at us shamefully, and the COs in the prisons and the jails who had went to church on Sunday and heard a negative message about us and mistreated us in the jail space. We saw the police officers who went to church on Sunday and who had a negative opinion of us, so they mistreated. We saw our boss. We saw all of these men around us, our uncles, our people who were friends with us before we began our transition. We saw them treat us in a negative way, and it was because of what they were being taught in church. I want to really briefly share with you another story, and normally I don't tell stories that aren't mine to tell, but I feel like this one is a very important one to tell. So I was friends with a white trans woman. She used to say racist things to me. She loved the black children, though. She used to call me a monkey. She used to say her great-great-grandparents beat my great-great-grandparents. And I wasn't upset enough because we had normalized this dynamic in the South. But we argued backwards and forwards. Like it was a common reading session to be arguing with a Southern white trans girl, and the conversation come up of my ancestors beat your great-great-grandmother. Like this was something that happened between us in the South, and somehow we still stayed in community with each other. But anyway, I knew how she talked. I knew that when she was upset, she would go to racism, but I also knew she loved black men. And she was dating this black man, and there were substances involved in their relationship, and ultimately they were in a toxic relationship, and the relationship ended with her unaliving him and taking his remains and hiding them in coolers in various spaces in a wooded area. And there those remains were left to rot for years until someone discovered them. When they found out who did it and were able to link her to it, her family interceded and told her that she needed to marry a woman and she needed to stop being trans and present as a man, and they would get her off of these charges. And they did. She did about maybe a year and a half in prison for unaliving this man from New Orleans and chopping his body parts up and putting them in various coolers on their land. I'm saying this to you to say this. If a white trans woman can unalive a black man, didn't, make the news in New Orleans, even though that's where the boy was from. It was never talked about on the news in New Orleans, never came up, okay? What makes you think that if a white man who had any type of resources, any type of family support would not be able to unalive a black trans woman and it not make the news and not be discussed and not be talked about? And so I want us to play the whole tape and come out of these fantasies in our mind simply because intentionally propaganda is being put out to make us feel unsafe with black men. We were sent here to remind our male siblings, our male counterparts. We were sent here to remind them of the divine power of the divine mother, the melanated divine mother. We were sent here to remind them. Now, if you really, really love your Caucasian man, then baby, love your Caucasian man. I am not against interracial dating. But some of us have a purpose, and that purpose is to stand 10 toes down and remind these males of their connection to their mother, to the divine mother, to the deeply melanated divine feminine goddess, to Mother Earth, to wake that up in them. instead of falling on our knees and praying to a lopsided, monotheistic, masculine, patriarchal spirituality, and then wondering why the ones who are the most hunted and the most targeted in the manosphere amongst men, wondering why they don't have no grace and they don't have no capacity for us, wondering why they're showing up for us the way that they're showing up for us. Because we thought we came here to be submissive to them. We thought we came here to serve them and to lift them up in the shenanigans, in the erasure, in the imbalance. Some of us thought that was our assignment. To play concubine, to play partner to that, not to help heal them and to restore them by having integrity and self-love. And I am guilty of this. I have allowed myself to do some things that but now I realize it's not trauma, it's grief. Because there were beings like us hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago who knew their role and who knew their purpose. And in this society, we have forgotten our way. And for some of us, it is meant for us to step away and to be in these relationships outside of black love. Because it's all black love at the end of the day, because everything comes from deeply melanated people. The void births the stars and the sun. Black folks are the heart, the soul, the gut. And when we heal ourselves, we can heal the entire body. We can model wholeness and healing for the entire body. So I just want to wake that up for y'all today. You think that a white man with any type of backing, any type of family support, any type of access to resources could not unalive a black trans woman and cover it up and make it look like he had nothing to do with it? No, the black men are just the only ones that are getting caught. Conveniently and purposely. And you dolls. This is why I don't like being called dolls, because let me tell you something. Y'all promoting that term dolls, but y'all do realize that y'all getting society ready for transhumanism, right? Because the dolls is really legit going to be AI dolls. They legit is going to be dolls that are created to submit, to be used romantically. 2 million people already participating actively in online relationships with AI bots. And they're getting the technology ready for them dolls, honey. You are being, you calling yourself a doll, the dolls, the dolls, the dolls, the dolls. You don't see what you're being used for? And I ain't got nothing against AI. I don't have nothing against the robots and the drones. But I do want to be clear that how you show up, if you lack soul, if you lack depth, if you lack spirit, if you lack understanding, those dolls gonna lack it even more. AI gonna lack it even more, because AI eats off of us. What we feed AI is how AI engages. And so if you damn near soulless yourself, what are you ingraining in the AI? AI see the dolls on the dollhouse fighting and worshiping material things and acting like bed wenches, clout chasing, acquiescing in society for the respect of their oppressor, constantly conforming, constantly assimilating to be validated in a white supremacist, patriarchal, fascist society. That's the representation that the dolls is giving. Sit with that for a little bit. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get off y'all nerves, but we're gonna play the whole tape over here at Lay Lim Lay Learn Nation. Purple Thought. If you're interested in learning more about how I gained the perspective that I have, please get my book. Not for me, for you. I already know this stuff. I went through it so I can help you through it. So as a favor to yourself or any queer person or any non-binary person or trans person you may have in your family, go get this book. It is our own personal Bible of recollecting reflections. Becoming Purple by Kaneem Mafa. That's all I got for y'all today. I love you. Be well and take care. And until next time, purple ones, rise.